Hey everyone and welcome back. Now, continuing our discussion of prepared queries, today we'll go ahead and implement the use case 2 associated with the failover policy. Now, as we are discussing that whenever a prepared query receives a request, it goes ahead and finds the service associated with the request under the local data center itself. So that is the first step. So if you look into the steps that are involved, Consul server in the local data center will attempt to find instances of app service within the DC1, which is the specific DC where the prepared query is running. If none are available locally, the Consul server will make a RPC request to the Consul servers in the data center 2 to perform the query there. So in this case, the Singapore DC is the data center 2. So the query will be made only if the service is not running in the data center 1. And also note that if it is not able to find the service in the second data center as well, it will go ahead and give an error back. So that is the high level steps. Let's go ahead and try and implement it. So for today's video, I already have two Consul servers that are running. One is associated with the India data center and second is associated with the Singapore data center. So within the Singapore data center, we do not really have any service. So what we'll be doing is we'll be creating a service in the Singapore data center. We'll not be creating a service in India data center. And with the prepared query, we'll reference to the service that is part of the Singapore data center to see in what exactly the prepared query will behave. So for today's use case of failover policy, we'll go ahead and create a service file under the instance where the second DC is running. So going back to the Singapore data center based DC, let's go ahead and create a file. Let's call it as db.json and I'll paste the contents here. Once done, let's go ahead and do a Consul reload. So as expected, within the Singapore data center, you have a service of database. So now the second step is to create a prepared query in the India data center, and this prepared query will be associated with the database service. So within the India data center instance, let's go ahead and create a prepared query. So the name of the JSON file is failover.json and the name of prepared query is failover. Now this failover prepared query is associated with the database service and that is associated with the tag of version 1, and within the failover we are giving the data center of Singapore. So in case if it is not able to find the service in the local DC, it will failover and check with the Singapore data center to see if any service is available there. So let's try it out. So within the first tab of India DC under the temp directory, let's go ahead and create a file called as failover.json and I'll paste the contents here. So we already know on how we can create a prepared query. So the request is post followed by the name of the file on the specific endpoint. Great. So our prepared query is created and this is the UUID associated with it. So now let's quickly do a dig on localhost. Port is 8600. The name of the prepared query is failover followed by query.consul and we'll be referencing to the SRV record. So now you see it is basically giving you the IP address. So even from the node name you can identify that this is associated with the Singapore data center and the port is 5080. Great. So since the prepared query was not able to find a database service in the India data center, it went ahead and it was able to resolve it based on the service associated with the Singapore data center here. Now let's do one more interesting thing. Let's go ahead and create this same service definition in the India data center and let's look into how prepared query would behave. So within the etc consul.d, let's go ahead and create a db.json here. This time, just for the sake of simplicity, I'll give a different port which is 6080 and I'll do a Consul reload. So going back to the India data center, again you have a database service that is available here. So now if you make a DNS on the prepared query, this time you will see that it is not referencing to the Singapore data center service. In fact, it is referencing to the service associated with the India data center and the port here you see is 6080. That's great. So I hope at a high level overview you understood the use case of a failover policy that can be achieved with the help of prepared query.